if you visualize where you're going, then it's easier for your brain to go that way. But if you've never visualized that, if you've never imagined, I can be a normal weight one day, I can eat certain foods one day, I can heal one day, then you'll never get there because you're not even allowing your brain to access that path.
What if all your health issues could be cured by going carnivore? Whether that's obesity, gut issues, hormonal imbalances, acne, brain fog, metabolic disorders, and so many other ailments people are suffering with today. That's what we're talking about in today's episode with Judy Cho, who was once plant-based for 12 years, but after needing to cure her relationship with food from an eating disorder and several other health issues, she decided to go all in on the meat and has truly transformed her life and is now working with patients to help transform theirs as well. We talk about all the things from even what a carnivore diet is, foods allowed and foods not allowed on this plan, why a carnivore diet actually helps and the science behind it, how eating a high-fat meat-based diet can actually help you lose weight, and if carnivore is safe for kids, tips to help kids eat more meat if they're struggling, and if there are any downsides to a carnivore diet, plus why we need iodine, and we even discuss how faith plays a huge role in the potential to heal. You guys, this was such an incredible conversation, and everyone that listens will take away at least 5 things from this episode. I can pretty much guarantee it, and I can't wait for you guys to listen. So let's get right into the interview. And you guys know this already, but you're listening to the Digest This podcast, and I'm your host, Bethany Cameron. All right, well, thank you so much, Judy, for coming on today. I'm so excited to have you and have my listeners listen to all the knowledge that you have to share.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've been excited to get on your show.
Yeah. So I always like to start my podcast off with rapid fire yes or no questions. So I have a few for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. And you can only answer yes or no.
Okay.
All right. Can the carnivore diet put ulcerative colitis into remission?
Yes.
Okay. Should children be on a carnivore diet?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll get into these deeper in. So I know it's all individualized. All right. Can medications cause hyperthyroid?
Yes.
Okay. And last one. Can iodine be toxic to humans? I know that's a tricky question because I feel like almost everything can be toxic to humans at the same time can be super beneficial because you can overload on anything.
Well, it also depends on the type of iodine. So I know there's old tests that made iodine seem dangerous, but that was radioactive iodine. Whereas if we're using the potassium iodide, the ones that, for example, is Lugol's, there's not much research showing that itself is harmful, even in excess amounts. You normally would pee it out. So that's even why I paused.
Yeah, like sea kelp or like things like that.
So you should be able to pee out the excess. So
yeah, as long as it's not again in a, I guess, synthetic form, perhaps.
Right, or the radioactive. Yes, there are different types or forms of iodine that can be harmful, and that's what the older studies that showed if too much excess iodine can cause imbalances in your thyroid function.
All right, you guys. So I have been making these special gummies and I have to give you the recipe. So get a pen and write this down. These gummies are so addicting and all you need are 3 main ingredients. They're not only good for the gut, but they can also help aid in hair growth, immune function, skin health, and they taste like a creamy ice cream pop you literally can just pop in your mouth. And all this is from the colostrum I add. So if you haven't guessed by now, these are creamy colostrum milk gummies that literally are like a pillow in your mouth. You can add a touch of honey if you want, or keep them 100% sugar-free for all my keto and low-carb friends. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about Armor Colostrum over and over by now, and for good reason. It's been clinically shown to help guard against inflammation and everyday toxins and pollutants. Colostrum intake has also been linked to fewer respiratory tract and GI infections in children and adults. In fact, There are over 5,000 published studies documenting the benefits of colostrum and its ability to optimize health from when we are born all the way through our elder years. But Armra colostrum is different from others on the market, and it's something I started taking back in March 2023, long before all the hype. They use a proprietary cold chain biopotent technology that distills over 200 functional nutrients, guaranteeing the highest bioactive integrity and bioavailability. Another thing I personally love about this company is that they only use the excess colostrum from grass-fed, pasture-raised, happy cows that are no longer needing it to supply their young. So you are not taking away from animals that need it. Only the surplus colostrum is used, and Armra makes sure they are getting only the best from healthy USA cows from family farms. Okay, so here's the creamy colostrum gummy recipe. Just get 2 tablespoons of grass-fed gelatin, 1 cup of your milk of choice, dairy or non-dairy, 1 tablespoon of honey, which is optional, and 1 tablespoon of Armra colostrum's unflavored grass-fed colostrum. And you can save 20% if you use code DIGEST at checkout on their website. It's tryarmra.com. Again, that's code DIGEST, and that will save you 20%. So what you're going to do with the ingredients is first you're going to pour the milk into a small saucepan, sprinkle the gelatin over the top and allow it to bloom for 5 minutes. If you're using honey, you're going to add that now, and then you're also going to add Armra colostrum to the pan. You're going to bring it to a medium heat while whisking. Just be sure not to boil it, just a medium heat. Now, once the milk is slightly warmed and everything is dissolved, just remove the pan from the heat and pour into any mold of choice or a glass dish. Then place the dish or the molds into the fridge for at least 2 hours or until set. Once set, just pop the gummies out into an airtight container, and then you're just going to return it to the fridge to store it. If you are using one large dish, then you can cut them into squares or whatever shape you prefer. If you haven't tried Armra colostrum by now, here's your chance. You can save 20%. Just go to tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST to receive a special discount for my podcast listeners. That's tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST. Again, that's tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST at checkout. I was able to try Peak Tea's new coffee alternative a month before it actually launched, and I've been obsessed ever since. It's called Nandaka, and it reminds me of an upscale hot cocoa when enjoyed warm, but you can also add it to a smoothie for a creamy coffee alternative drink. It's designed to help hormone regulation, and who doesn't need a little hormone regulating these days? Am I right? This blend is infused with ceremonial Peruvian cacao to activate metabolism, functional mushrooms to enhance mood and promote cellular renewal, and fermented pu'er teas that provide calm, sustained energy. And if it's from Peak, then you already can trust it's organic, vegan, and non-GMO. And the best part is that there's no added sugar, preservatives, fillers, or quote, natural flavors that are commonly being added to teas and drink mixes these days, which is quite disturbing, honestly. So I know I can trust Peak Tea because they don't add any nasties or questionable ingredients. Plus, they triple toxin screen all their teas for purity, ensuring no mold, pesticides, heavy metals, or harmful chemicals are in their tea crystals. And yes, even though they're all certified organic, Peak Tea still takes the extra step to screen all their powders. So whether you drink coffee or not, I really think you'll be obsessed, just like I am, with their Nandaka coffee alternative. It's perfect hot or chilled. And this is really cool because they have a free 30-day return policy. So if you try something and you're not happy with it, just send it back for a refund. And you guys know I got a deal for you as well. So if you go to peaklife.com/digest, you can receive up to 15% off plus up to 2 free gifts. That's peaklife.com/digest to get a discount and some freebies. That's peaklife.com/digest. So we can get into these questions a little bit deeper, but before we do, can you just quickly share just a little bit about you and your past and how you overcame so many different struggles in your own life and the connection the carnivore diet played in your healing?
Yes. So I was never into wellness. I think for the most part, as I was young, I was a pretty decently healthy kid, but I decided to go plant-based. I was born and raised in California, went to UC Berkeley, so, plant-based city. And I thought it was for the environment, for my health. And so I was plant-based for about 12 years. And in that stint, I didn't know much about supplementing vitamin B12. I would still eat sometimes eggs occasionally, but I would eat mostly the egg whites, so therefore there wasn't a lot of the nutrition in there. And as I noticed that I started having deterioration of health, especially mental illness, started having an eating disorder where I would binge and purge many times a day. And I never attributed it to my diet. So lots of my therapists and psychiatrists said, it is your stress. It's something you were just sort of born with. Your neurotransmitters aren't functioning properly. And I believed all of that. So for 12 years, and even through a pregnancy, I stayed plant-based. And it wasn't until my first child was 6 months old that I finally had a breakdown. I was still sort of using behaviors of eating disorder ways, which isn't ideal. And I was still eating plant-based. And then I had a mental breakdown. So I was nursing around the clock. I wasn't eating sufficiently. I wasn't supporting my body. And in the hospital, they said she has a full-blown eating disorder and she's suffering from major depression. So we think she should go into an intensive eating disorder facility, which I fully did. And in there, they were trying to teach me ways of intuitive eating, mindfulness, and all of those things helped in some capacity, learning boundaries and self-care, and all of those things again helped. But I would eventually fall again, and then I would use my old behaviors, and I was all the time still plant-based. And I never understood why I wasn't better. And I just thought, I'm just not good enough. I'm just not strong enough. Something's just broken in me that I just can't say no to binging. And my brother decided to go on a keto diet. Long story short, I tried to prove to him that what he was doing was going to give him a heart attack and that it was so bad for him, only to find out that I've been wrong this whole time, that in fact, a lot of my illness probably was attributed to the way that I was eating. And so I went keto for about a year and I was still plant-based eating that way. That helped so much because I was now eating healthier fats, but I would still struggle. So a keto treat would end up becoming real sugar and then to a full-on binge. And I heard about the carnivore diet, thought it was so crazy because first of all, I haven't eaten meat for 12 years. And my friend said, why don't you try it? Because I've seen other people really improve some crazy illnesses. And so I said no, but I was in this cycle again. And people understand when you're in this vicious cycle of binging and having shame after and then depression and all of those emotions, I just said, screw it. I have children and I have to get better. And so I decided to try it just for 2 weeks. The very first time I ate meat, I threw up because I think it was more psychological than anything. And then afterward, I was able to eat it. And I don't know how to explain it specifically, but all of a sudden, my body's need for the desire to binge went away, even though the emotional side was still there where I kind of wanted to do it because that was how I was coping. But the physical side where nothing could stop me went away. And then slowly as I stayed on the diet, I started healing. And then I wanted to know, how did this fix me or heal me so much that in 12 years of me trying to find answers of why I was broken, why I would miss work, why I was in the bathroom more than any other thing, and I would cancel all my social engagements, and all it took was meat? Like, that sounds crazy. And so I went back to nutritional therapy school. I went back and I learned so much about the way I was fueling my body was wrong, and that it wasn't that I was broken. My psychiatrist told me that I would forever have to take some type of antipsychotics or antidepressants, and I listened and I was on all of them, and it didn't work enough. And now I'm on nothing, and I just as I learned more, I got mad. I was robbed of my first year with my son. I had to have him be taken care of by my mom. And it's the worst nightmare that a mom can have is when you just aren't a good enough mom. And so then I just became an advocate because I never want people to go through a lot of the struggles I did. I mean, you can imagine 12 years of being in the bathroom more than anywhere else, the lying, the sneaking around, the binging, purging, and lying to everybody about it. And now I don't struggle with any of those things. And I eat mostly meat still, but it's just, I think people can get a second chance if they were to change their diet. And we are told so differently to eat. And I did what everyone says to do, eat a plant-based diet, be healthy. And I was the opposite.
Wow, what a story. I mean, I have so many questions for you. How old were you when you decided to make the switch? And if you don't mind, if you how old are you now?
So I was plant-based. So I turned plant-based in college. So maybe in my early 20s, maybe 19, 20, 21. And I'm actually 42 now. So
Wow.
I got, it was in my pregnancy with my first child that it was in, I think I was like 33. And then I got sick during that time. So that whole stint, I was plant-based. So it was a total of 12 years. And then it was when Aiden, my second child, I was in pregnancy that I decided to become carnivore. And I was keto-ish right before that. But I was afraid because no doctor was able to tell me what exactly happened. I had lost my memory. I was out on a 72-hour hold. And for the people that are listening that don't know that, it's when people feel or the doctors feel that you are a harm to yourself, they are taking away your rights of freedom. And so they put me in a hospital where I had no choice but to stay in there. And they're saying, you are in harm and we don't know if you would self-harm. And so you're going to stay in here. And I don't remember any of it because I had a psychotic break from whatever had happened. Now, I took antibiotics in that midst of all of that because I had mastitis. I had an infection in my breast when I was breastfeeding. So something along the lines of not eating enough, having an eating disorder, plus taking the antibiotics, not enough sleep because of a brand new baby, all of that in the mix with stress then caused me to have a psychotic breakdown where when I went to sleep, it was weeks later until I got my memory back. And it just felt like a bad dream that had happened. So I don't remember getting intaked. I don't remember really being in there, but I remember short bits of it. And my friend would ask me, my friend would come to visit me. And I don't remember any of this, but I get emotional when I talk about it. And I would always say, where's Caleb? I have to breastfeed Caleb. And every time she would have to tell me again, you stopped because you're taking Class C drugs now. And I would cry every time. And for the days that she would come and visit. And so that happened probably in the early 30s. So it took about 10, 12 years for me to fully crash with the plant-based diet. And then, so I've been eating, I was strict carnivore for about 3 years, and now I'm eating more meat-based. So there's maybe like 5% of my diet might be some plants or sweeteners, or I know sweeteners aren't ideal, but, and I've been eating this way now for 7 years.
Okay.
And nope, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's just amazing to me that you lost your memory,
Yeah.
and I'm sure, like you said, it was probably a combination of all the things happening at once. But I think that diet could definitely play a part in that, and the lack of certain nutrients and minerals that come from only meat.
Right. They never could figure out what exactly got me sick other than to say you have an eating disorder and you have postpartum, which doesn't explain, but how did I lose my memory? How did I have a psychotic break? And they weren't entirely sure. The antipsychotics seemed to level me more, but my memory still wasn't back. But my husband said you were acting way more normal, quote unquote, once you took those medications. So we stayed on it because we're like, oh, maybe that's what it is. But so when I was then pregnant with my second child, while everyone gets ready to decorate the baby's room and stuff, I was going around looking for a estate planner in case my memory lost again, and I would never be normal again. And so I was going around 7 months pregnant, looking for somebody to write my will and all the things that would take care of my children in case I never got my memory back. And then it was right after that then I became carnivore. But that was the grief I went through. And I just never wanted anyone to go through that again, because if you get proper nutrition, and sure, you could say, well, you didn't take your vitamin B12 supplementation, sure. But I also was eating so clean plant-based where I was eating big bowl spinach salads with a bunch of iron in it. And my OBGYN told me I was anemic. And never once did I think, well, that's weird. I eat a pound of spinach, which should have sufficient iron, but I'm anemic. So then instead, I just got onto iron pills to support the anemia, not knowing that the iron in spinach is not the same iron that's in meat. And so it needs to be converted. But if you have weak gut function, you'll never absorb that iron. No one tells you these things. They just say it's the same thing. And so therefore, whether you eat spinach or whether you eat meat, you're getting your iron. And it is not true.
Yeah. It's like the same thing with fat. Like, yeah, fat is fat, but there's good fats and there's really bad fats. And going back here, gosh, you just gave me chills just from like your story. So your second pregnancy, you had mentioned that you went more animal-based or you were eating more meat. So can you explain and share the differences between being plant-based pregnant and animal-based and how maybe it was a lot easier or maybe it wasn't? I don't know.
So I became animal-based after the pregnancy. So I would say technically both of them were more plant-based. So I don't have that difference, but what I can tell you is with nursing. So my first child, even though I was plant-based, I was able to nurse. And so I feel fortunate for that, but I don't know if the nursing caused some of the nutritional deficiencies in my mental health. Again, I'll never know that. But 6 months in of him full-time nursing was when I had my break, and then he had to get on formula. And it's interesting. So my husband supported my plant-based diet and tried to give him soy formula at first, and he refused it. And over time, then they switched to dairy or cow milk formula. And again, I don't know all the nuances because I don't remember any of it. But with my second child, by the time he was nursing, I was fully carnivore, and he was able to nurse for 5 years. So for that, I just attribute it to, now I know that's kind of weird for people, but I think it's also like my PTSD, right? So it's like, I didn't get the full chance. Like, I don't even know how I weaned my son off. Like when I woke up, quote unquote, from my psychotic break, I was no longer nursing. I no longer had milk in me. So I don't even know how it feels to wean. So with my second child, I just said, I will let him nurse until he's ready to wean. And obviously the last 3 years was more that he just maybe nursed one time for 1 minute a day, but he was still nursing. But I attribute the diet and my nutrient sufficiency to have the ability to then have him be able to nurse for that long. And I think that's a big difference I saw when I was nursing Aiden to 5 years or when he turned 5 versus Caleb, which he was only 6 months old.
Wow. Okay. So now I want to talk about basically the carnivore basics because maybe a lot of people listening, they've heard of it, but they still don't know what exactly it is. So let's kind of go over the basics here. So first of all, what is it? I mean, it's basically an elimination diet, right?
Yes. So the way that I view the carnivore diet is I think it's truly an elimination diet. So we think about different foods, different plants, different ingredients, additives that may cause gut irritability, may cause mental illness, may just cause inflammation in the body. And so we have all these elimination diets. We have GAPS, we have FODMAP diet, we have low sugar diets, we have all these different diets. So if you look at all of the diets, almost every single elimination diet at the very beginning, the strictest stage, they still include meats. But what they do differently from one another is there's certain plants that they will argue that, okay, this plant or this nightshade because of the capsicum or this oxalate because of the, different oxalates, they will say remove certain plants. But the argument should just be instead of having a patient or a person have to remove certain plants and then remember that to see, do you feel any better? Why not just do the most ultimate elimination diet of just meat? Because meat does have enough nutrition and we can talk about that. But if you were to just go down to the basics of just meat, maybe just beef, depending on the person and how unwell they are, and then use a food and mood journal and see how well you are starting to feel, how much your symptoms are starting to subside. And then from there, as you start healing, you could say, okay, I know my baseline of health now, and let me see what else I can introduce. And I'm so supportive if you want to introduce plants back, but at least get to a baseline of what foods are bothering me. And it could be some of the meats as well. But that is where I think fundamentally why a carnivore diet is so beneficial, because one, it does have enough nutrition, and if not more than any plant-based diet will ever, gives you the sufficient fats that you need to support your brain and all your hormones. And then it also allows your gut to rest, where you don't have to convert different nutrition into the proper form that your body can absorb and support. And also it doesn't have these foes that your body may have to start fighting off. So a carnivore diet at its core is all the animal-based products. Now, there are different nuances where some people may have sensitivities of mast cell activation, which is where your immune system may react even to dairy, as an example, or eggs. Those are some big triggers. So in the way that I've described it in Carnivore Cure, my book, there's an elimination protocol where maybe step one or phase one is super strict, where you're just eating ruminant meats. And the only reason we pick ruminant meats is we found that ruminant meats, which is basically like cows and so on and so forth. But those meats have the least amount of reactivity or immunocompromised sensitivities. And so you start with that. If that feels fine, then you can try to add pork back, or you could try to add chicken back and see how do you do. And so there's like a step-by-step. I have a free guide. I can give you the link to it. And you can try that. And then over time, what you'll see is, were there certain plant-based foods that were affecting me that I had no idea? And those are the nuances that we don't know when we're eating. Okay, I'm just going to remove broccoli. I'm just going to remove onions and garlic and maybe nightshades. But what if there's something else that you don't realize that is affecting you? So why not just rip off the Band-Aid, try just meat to see how much can you heal? And then also start to see, is it just food that I'm affected by? Because what we've also found when people do really strict elimination diets is they find that the environment itself is affecting them, and it actually has nothing to do with the diet.
Yeah, I know. That's some really, really good tips there. So basically, you did explain the bare bones. So what is allowed and what's not allowed on a carnivore diet? Let's just say, okay, they did the real strict elimination and now they're basically living a quote carnivore lifestyle. What's allowed, what's not allowed?
So I think it's really depends on the person. I know online you'll see all these rules of like, and there's the carnivore police that'll say, you can't eat that, that's not carnivore. You can't drink coffee because that's from a plant. I really think it depends on what makes you thrive, right? So I am all about the individual, but technically the definition of carnivore is anything that's not carnivore or animal based should not be included. All the fish, those are permitted. Anything that's from an animal is allowed. But if you were to think about herbs, seasonings, coffee, teas, the strictest of the strict would not allow that. They would only allow basically water. If your water has natural flavors, that would not be allowed either. So it's just anything that's derived from any type from the plant kingdom would not be permitted. But I've also seen, since I have a full-time practice, that's where where I primarily have my time and focus. We find that when people are super strict and they're like, I'm only going to get better if I remove everything, and then my ulcerative colitis, or then my gut function, or then my mental health will get better. And when they're not fully getting better, they'll think, oh my gosh, it's because I left in the pepper. It's my fault. And so you start seeing this constant, it is my fault I'm not healing. I see all these people on the internet healing so much. And so we have learned in our practice that you have to meet the client where they are. It is not the black pepper or the little bit of X that you're leaving in that is making you not have the full benefits of a carnivore diet. We've just seen that over time. And we have just found that you have to allow the client to have some grace in a sense, right? Because we can't control everything. And so if the client figures out what helps them and what isn't helping them, then we can also give our guidance and recommendations of, it is probably not the little bit of onions you left in, but initially go strict. Then if you add onions, if you feel bad, then obviously they could be the onions. But if for some people, leaving in the onions may make them feel bad, but it's really actually something in the house that's making them feel sick, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so like you said, like coffee maybe wouldn't be permitted. So what about, so dairy, because that comes from an animal, that's considered carnivore?
Yes, it is. So there's some people that say dairy, and I'm not entirely sure why they wouldn't include it because it is from an animal. I also think dairy is so good just for the gut function, just because it has the most amount of butyrate, butter specifically, than any other. So butyrate's a short chain fatty acid. That's one of the reasons why people want you to, or, the recommendations is to eat a lot of fiber because of the breakdown into short chain fatty acids. But butter has, I think there was a study in 2016 that showed that butter has the most amount of butyrate per ounce compared to any other food. Now, I know not everyone can tolerate butter or dairy because of the different autoimmune effects. So if that's the case, then you would have to remove it. But that's where I think, again, carnivore, if you think about everything in the animal kingdom, even if it's produced by an animal is okay, including the sea, including the land, including the air. But beyond that, if you are not getting better eating a bunch of everything in that whole range of what I just mentioned, then we start going stricter and stricter to see, can I get better with food alone? So then you could maybe just do beef for a while or just lamb for a while. Am I getting better with just that? And if you're not, we as a practice can indicate, okay, yeah, that is beyond just the diet versus, okay, maybe you need to just eat a little bit more fat, or maybe you need to time your meals a little bit differently. So there's all these like small nuances, but in general, I think using a food and mood journal paired with the carnivore diet is key to see what foods are my carnivore diet, if that makes sense.
This is quite interesting and a little heartbreaking, but approximately 92% of Americans are nutrient deficient and nearly 50% are deficient in vitamin B12 specifically, which can lead to issues like anemia, vascular disease, stroke, autoimmune conditions, fatigue, and dementia. B12 is the only vitamin that we cannot get from plants or sunlight. It is the only vitamin found in animal products. And the richest source of natural B12 on the planet is grass-fed beef liver. In fact, severe B12 deficiency used to be fatal until scientists figured out death could be prevented by feeding patients raw liver. Now, I'm not going to eat raw liver, and I'm sure you aren't either. But I am a huge fan of consuming meat organs. However, I know most have a difficult time with either the taste of them or just simply digesting them. But organ meats such as liver, heart, kidneys, and spleen are some of the most nutrient-dense foods in the world. I would hate for myself or anyone to go without them in their diet. That's why I personally opt for Equip Foods grass-fed beef organ capsules. It's a blend of grass-fed heart, kidney, and spleen that's dehydrated and put into a capsule form to easily be consumed with any meal or a glass of water. Just 3 ingredients and no fillers, no flow agents, and no additional ingredients are added. No antibiotics, steroids, or hormones. They're also gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, dairy-free, non-GMO, and gently freeze-dried to preserve the nutrients, making them bioavailable for easy digestion and absorption. They're easy to swallow with no flavor or aftertaste. Equip Foods has liver capsules as well. So if you're particularly interested in upping your iron, grass-fed organs are the best option there is. They're rich in vitamin A, vitamin B12, coenzyme Q10, heme iron, and selenium. These nutrients provide a multiple of benefits for immunity and vitality. If you're not sure about them, Equip Foods has a 30-day, 100% money-back guarantee. So if you aren't thrilled with your order, just let them know and they'll refund you without any questions asked. You really have nothing to lose and all the health to gain. If you go to equipfoods.com/digest and use code DIGEST, you will get 20% off your order. Again, go to equipfoods.com/digest and use code DIGEST for 20% off. That's equipfoods.com/digest and use code DIGEST. Research shows the average cleaning product contains chemicals that are affecting our lungs. The researchers also added that accelerated lung function declines in those who clean regularly with bleach-based products, disinfectants, and degreasers containing 2-butoxyethanol, commonly referred to as EGBE. This is all just another reason why I use Branch Basics for my cleaning needs. You just mix their non-toxic concentrate with water in a glass spray bottle, and you're good to go and clean your entire home. Everything from your kitchen to your bathroom to your living room and even your kids' toys. It's safe around your kids and pets, and it actually works. It's 100% biodegradable, fragrance-free, and contains no harmful substances. Their concentration is derived from plants and minerals, And the best part is that you only have to buy one product. If you want to clean up your home and your health by using Branch Basics, they're offering my listeners 15% off. Just use code LILSIPPER at checkout to receive a discount. I recommend starting with their starter kit, which includes everything you'll need with simple instructions. Again, if you go to branchbasics.com and enter code LILSIPPER at checkout, that's LILSIPPER at checkout, you'll receive a discount. Going back to dairy, I feel like that is also such a broad thing to say, because then there's raw dairy and then there's, cultured dairy, which is like yogurt and kefir, which for me, I can have yogurt and kefir, but like typical milk, unless it's raw, I can't, but raw is okay. So it's like so specific. Now, what about, I'm just curious, because I do see a lot of people and they're like, oh, I'm on the carnivore diet, and then they're eating like avocados. Like, what do you think about that? Or nuts or things like that?
So I think in the definition of things, that would fall more into like ketovore. So they're eating mostly meat-based. And so I'll occasionally have some avocado. I mean, it's not my most favorite fruit, but I'll have some. So technically I wouldn't be considered carnivore in that sense. So that's why I say I'm now more meat-based. That is not by definition carnivore. But I think, again, it's that whole, I don't want to shame someone just because if the avocado allows them to eat 98% meat and that allows them to thrive, then I don't want to say, sorry, you're kicked out of the carnivore club. But by medical definitions, it is not carnivore.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about carnivore for children, but first of all, carnivore for adults. Let's get into that first. So can this diet help regulate women's hormones specifically?
So I believe it can. We've had many women with PCOS. We've also have women with amenorrhea, so they don't have their period. It's not consistent. We've had one woman, she was in her late 20s, and she didn't have her period for over a year. And then we had her, and she even tried the repeat diet, which is a diet that's like, they reduce all linoleic acid or a certain type of omega-6 fatty acid, and they eat sugars and they eat just more natural foods. And it's like a very, very clean version of paleo, heavily meat-based, but it didn't work for her. And just 3 months into the carnivore diet, eating heavy fat or higher fat, she was able to get her period back, and it was very consistent thereafter. And we've seen many people like that. We've seen also women in menopause or perimenopause where they're having really bad hot flashes at night or throughout the day, and they're on lots of different hormone medications. They were able to lower their dose, including thyroid medications. We see that very often where thyroid medication, depending on how long you've been on it, maybe they'll have to lower it just to the lowest dose and they can't fully get off, but we always see the reduction. And the main reason is all your sex hormones are produced by cholesterol. Now, your body produces maybe 40 to 60% of the cholesterol. And if cholesterol was so bad, why would your body take all that energy to produce its own cholesterol? But beyond that, when our modern society is so stressed out and we are tapping into our needs for cholesterol even more, because your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, also is derived from cholesterol. So if you are using all your stress hormones to use that cholesterol, then where does the sex hormone part comes? Your body is a very intelligent being. And if it feels that you, for example, are not able to support a production of a baby, it will reduce the sex hormones and use it to have you just survive another day. And the survival of another day is creating that cortisol. So when we then support the body by eating a lot of fatty meat, so think about ribeye with a lot of that excess fat, I think it's like 70% fat. And then maybe you add like a tablespoon of cultured butter, or you add a little bit more of different types of fatty fat. That will then support that cholesterol production and then give you more raw materials to support the functions of all the different sex hormones. There are all the pathways for sex hormone, cortisol, and even the balance of blood sugar, they're all in the same pathway areas. And your body will prioritize the production of cortisol, even to balance blood sugars, to manage stress, than for all of your sex hormones. So if you are not balancing your stress, then it will not support the sex hormones. So in the interim, obviously you have to work on that, working on reducing the stress and balancing blood sugars, but you can also support the body by giving it more raw materials of fat.
Yeah. And I've even heard that people have reversed their acne with the carnivore diet, which I'm sure acne is connected to hormones as well. So that just totally makes sense. I've even heard IBS, Crohn's colitis, and just different gut issues have been reversed.
Yes.
If you want to explain a little bit about that. And then I also have a question, because I'm sure everyone's going to ask this as well. Oh my gosh, is it going to make me gain weight because of all the fat and yada, yada? So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't think there's ever been an illness that we have not seen some level of improvement, even in our clinical practice. We work with some of the most unwell carnivores. So it's when carnivore is a pretty easy diet, right? You eat just meat and you figure out what is making me feel better. I'll eat more fat if I need to, if I feel more hungry. But when it doesn't work, it's when people work with us. And so we get to see some of the hardest cases. And even with those hard cases, we see meat do numbers of healing, but maybe they're not moving the needle enough and there might be something else there. But in terms of all of these gut issues, so I try to think of things very logically to just make it make sense. Animals are able to run from their predators, but plants are just kind of stuck in the soil, and so are eggs, right? So they're on the ground and they're just waiting to hatch. But the way that all plants or animals, we are trying to have our next generation survive. So for plants, because they can't run, the way that they are made is they have toxins within their system. That's why we know by now, most people know that there's gluten, which is a very difficult protein for our bodies to digest, and it causes gut permeability, and it's just not ideal for most people, even if you don't have celiacs. Well, every plant has many, many different types of toxins. So if we just understand that facet, we know that nightshades have that capsicum, as I was mentioning. There's also oxalates, lectins that are also in grains. There's phytic acid, which I find it so interesting that all of these, what we call anti-nutrients, are what plants have as protective mechanisms, so that you will, if you eat it, you learn, okay, I'll never eat this again. So it's a survival mechanism. But for example, we feed our babies oatmeal from when they're a child, but anemia is one of the most nutritional deficiencies in all of the world. 40% of the world of children are anemic. And I think in Africa, it's 60%. If we were to just eat a little bit of meat, that can resolve a lot of that issue. And additionally, it is the phytic acid, the oatmeal itself, that binds to minerals. So even if they are eating a little bit of meat, it's the oatmeal and the enzymes in it, the anti-nutrients, that are blocking the iron to get absorbed. So we could resolve so much of this issue by eating just a little bit of meat and maybe reducing the oatmeal load. So all of these things, all to say, so if we understand that lay of the land, we know that plants in some instances can cause inflammation in the gut. And additionally, whether you're using GMO products or organic, they're all in the same area. So you can't say, okay, glyphosate that's on GMO plants, I'm just going to spray it on this left side, but the wind won't blow it on the organic side. And additionally, organic plants, they still use organic pesticides and herbicides. So even though it's safer, for example, when I was doing my research for Carnivore Cure, glyphosate sprayed in one section, they'll use 2 pounds per acre, whereas a organic compound, they'll use 9 pounds per acre. So they need to spray more and more often. So, and some of these organic compounds, just because it's organic doesn't mean it's fully safe. I mean, arsenic is organic. So what they've done is some of these are so effective, they've created lab versions of these organic compounds. 2 of them are rotenone, and I'm forgetting the other one. But so knowing all of these things, so plants, first of all, you just wash them. Even if you try to remove all the pesticides, you probably can't. Now it's in our waters as well. So whether it's glyphosate, whether it's any of these organic compounds. So now we're getting exposed in water. We're also getting exposed in the air because it's in our parks. So we are getting all of these things that affect us, give us more inflammation. And then when we start eating foods that maybe our gut function is not able to properly break down, whether it's vitamin A, vitamin K2, B12, which doesn't even exist in plants. And these foods, then they have to be digested and absorbed to become the version that we can tolerate. But plants, if your gut function is not ideal, and now it's also giving you inflammation because you're maybe sensitive to gluten or lectins or one of the anti-nutrients, is causing all of this gut disarray. And if you're stressed, your gut is also more leaky. So if you think about all of those things, if we were just to reduce the plants and eat mostly meat, because meat has the most bioavailable nutrients, meaning that even if you have poor gut function, you can absorb the nutrients and the raw materials, and you can just give less stress to the gut, cause less inflammation, and your gut can start to finally rest, and it could support itself to maybe start getting more resilient. And that's why I think a lot of people on a carnivore diet, whether it's IBS, ulcerative colitis, they are starting to find healing because they are reducing so much of the noise from the plants. And we don't even know which specific ones are affecting them. But by just reducing all of it, you get the glyphosate mostly out of your system, any organic compounds from the plants, and then also the plant toxins. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that it's a big benefit. And your skin microbiome is very reflective of your gut microbiome. So it makes sense why people's skin starts getting much better on a carnivore diet as well.
Wow, yeah, and it's amazing. Meat is literally a superfood, and I feel like
it is.
We've been lied to for years. For years, we've been lied to. I mean, I'll digress there, but what about all the people that are like, oh my gosh, but it's going to make me gain weight because I'm eating butter and fat and the meat is so fatty. And I've even seen people lose weight on the carnivore diet. So what would you say to that?
So the biggest way that obesity happens, or that people gain weight, is that if you are eating a lot of sugar, your body has to use cortisol too, but it will use insulin to bring it down because your body can only have a certain amount of sugar in the blood at any given time. And so knowing that when we start having the afternoon crash and we start drinking coffee, that's cortisol, or the support to raise your blood sugar, or if you then grab a donut or something. So once you stop eating those foods that cause this like insulin glucose roller coaster, you'll be able to tap into your energy stores, because once insulin comes, it locks away all your energy and you're not able to grasp it. And so that's why people use the coffee and the teas and the other forms of sugar. But when you're eating a carnivore or keto diet, you actually use the ketones and the fatty acids from actually your body to support yourself when you're actually not eating. And that's why people will measure their ketones in their blood or in their urine. And it is not common to see weight gain, but it can happen. And where I see it happen the most is for certain women that maybe have been eating like 500 to 800 calories a day. And now they're trying to eat sufficiently to get their hormones back into a normal place. And they'll say, they don't really say they gained weight. They normally say they stalled. So I think it's a period where your body will have to rebalance. But if you think of it this way, obesity or even fat cells is where we store our toxins. It's where our bodies say, I can't expel this from our body, so I'm going to recycle it and put it and store it in our fats until we can. So our bodies don't want to be fat. I mean, I know that they say this often in the carnivore community, but how many animals in the wild are overweight? So if you start to support the body will start to regulate the liver, kidneys, the skin will start to detox. And then you could start removing whatever toxins may be stored in the fat. And if you give it time, your body will rebalance and find a homeostatic point that will allow your body to be in a normal state if it's functioning healthier. I've been carnivore or mostly meat-based for now almost 7 years. Maybe this is TMI, but I've never had a missed period. I sleep at least 7 to 8 hours a day. I don't wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm in my 40s. Most people in their 40s start taking some kind of medication. I'm not on none of that stuff, and I'm not on any psychiatric meds. So I think that it is not that we are missing carbs or there's something that, and I'm a normal, I guess, weight. I think it's just once your body rebalances, it will find a way, whether it's losing the weight that may have the toxins in the fat, but most people don't stay obese on a carnivore diet, and there might be something off. Sometimes we also see that people are eating way too many processed foods, whether it's like a lot of the beef jerkies, heavy cream, that becomes people's favorite food but it's super calorically dense. It's highly pasteurized, highly homogenized. It's super processed, probably not real milk. And so for those, there's many, many reasons when we get into the case studies of why people are not losing weight.
Yeah. And for those two that can't see you, because they're just listening. I mean, you're gorgeous. You have beautiful skin. Your hair is thriving. And I would even say you're more on the slimmer side of a weight. And, you know, you look amazing. And so definitely you're a perfect example of what someone should look like and feel like on a carnivore diet. Now, you did mention some like processed foods. Is there let me rephrase this. Is there such a thing as dirty carnivore? Because I know there's something called dirty keto. Yes. Is there any dirty carnivores out there?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, sometimes when we are traveling, we'll probably use dirty carnivore foods. I think it's the foods that are processed, right? Like the Jack Links, they're probably not the most ideal spam, not the most ideal foods, right? So there are meats that, and I'm sure that they use some level of the soy proteins. I would say all of those fall into the dirty carnivore. So it's really carnivore at its best is when you get the whole meat, you just use a little bit of salt. You eat the fat around it. You don't really use even the butter that's been processed and homogenized and pasteurized. And it's just going back to the way nature intended it. That would be what I really define as true carnivore. And so the dirty side is when, you know, you're eating pepperoni that's on the shelf. Like, how does pepperoni stay on the shelf without being refrigerated, yep. Right? So those are probably where I would define as dirty, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that on a carnivore lifestyle long term. If you are fighting an illness, you may have to reduce those types of foods. We see people that react to the dirty carnivore foods often, and it's the people that are very chronically ill.
Mm-hmm. Is there such a thing as a low-fat carnivore? Because I feel like just carnivore in general is very high fat.
It is. So the simplest way I talk about this is we get our energy not from protein. We get it from either glucose or fat, or so carbs or fat. And so you can't really you could technically try to do carnivore with lean protein. So just like tuna, chicken breast, but you will really drag in energy. Your body can convert proteins to sugars and then support the glucose need on your body, but it is very taxing. And within a week or even a few days, you will feel that drag. You'll feel that you're never satiated. You'll feel you don't want to eat meat anymore, and you will feel super, super low energy. And over time, if you look at the caloric intake, so you may hit your protein need that you need to eat every day, which is a good thing, but you will not hit your total caloric consumption to support your body's processes. And so you will hit a wall, and that's probably where most people will start to get hypothyroid. I've seen so many people leave the diet saying, I got poor hormone function or thyroid imbalances from this diet, but it's usually because they were under eating.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I feel like people don't even realize our brain runs off of fat. Like our brain needs fat. It's mostly fat is our brain. And
right.
That's what it needs is fat. Now, switching gears here, I do want to talk about carnivore diets for children. First of all, is it safe? Are there any nutrient deficiencies? What about people going through puberty? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think carnivore can be absolutely done by children. The reason I paused earlier is, and I'll totally explain it right now, but just as you were saying that the brain is mostly fat, it's 60% cholesterol. So we understand that the brain is mostly fat and it functions off fat. So when we give children low fat, think about what it's doing to its brain when it's actually growing and exponentially when it's a child. I think all children should have their main focus be fatty meats. And then beyond that, why I paused was, so when I first went carnivore, I said, the whole family needs to go carnivore. Our children are young. This is when their brains are growing. So I try to have our kids eat carnivore. And what I saw was that in their schools, you could feel this but I'm not normal like my other friends. And not to say that we should follow what they're doing, but I struggled with an eating disorder for 12 years of my life or 10 years. And I never want them to go through what I did, where it's I really desire that food, but I know it's bad for me, so I shouldn't eat it. And I thought about, will my kids leave me and go to college and then binge off of pizzas and beers because I never allowed them or permitted in the house that they could eat anything beyond carnivore? So we went for our children mostly meat-based, and occasionally they just eat a standard American meal, unfortunately, but that's real life. It is absolutely safe. There is no nutrition missed eating a carnivore diet. I think it's actually optimal for children as they're growing. So kids grow their muscles, their bones, their joints, all and their brains, and then their hormone function. So during puberty, your hormones start shifting a lot. Again, we talked about sex hormones being mostly from cholesterol. So fat is so important. And then proteins are what are building blocks of our body. So you want to make sure they're eating sufficient protein. And so for my boys, they eat fatty meats at first, and then they may have like a small, like a natural popsicle, for example, or they'll have like a fruit afterward. But their bodies can handle it because they've never been diabetic. They've never been insulin resistant. So they can handle that little bit of carbs, not a big deal. But I know some people will go, well, what about vitamin C? What about fiber? My Aiden, for 1 or 2 years of his life, only had breast milk. There's very minimal vitamin C in breast milk, and he is thriving. I also, when I was writing the book, we looked into vitamin C, and in 1970, it was maybe 45 milligrams for an adult male. Then they changed it in the 80s. And then in 1990s, they changed it to be about 90 milligrams for men. So it's double the amount in just 20 years or 25 years. So how do we know that vitamin C, even the amount that they recommend now, is correct? Well, one interesting fact is that one type of vitamin C receptor is also the same one that competes with glucose being metabolized. So could it be that we're eating too much sugar that is blocking the vitamin C from being absorbed? And so instead of saying, maybe we should reduce the glucose level so then we get sufficient vitamin C, which may be very little of a need, let's actually just dump in more vitamin C and not address the root cause issue. And if you think again about breast milk, there isn't a lot of vitamin C in it. And then just the last thing, the main reason people get scared of vitamin C is scurvy from the story of sailors. But the interesting fact that most people don't know about that story is, so people were on a boat, the sailors got scurvy, and so they said it was a vitamin C deficiency. Well, all the sailors were eating the same food, but only half of the men got scurvy. So maybe there was a different factor in it, but I don't think it was just vitamin C alone. Maybe there was a genetic play, I'm not sure. But it's just, I don't think we need the vitamin C levels as we do. I mean, I almost never eat fruit. I never really take vitamin C unless maybe I'm getting a cold, but I'm thriving. So I just don't think, like, how do we have this data? Or I almost never eat fiber. And we talked about a little bit about the short chain fatty acids. So just to do a really quick breakdown, we understand now that it takes energy, it takes a good, proper gut function to break down fiber into short chain fatty acids, which is what our colon needs to thrive. So that's why we're eating fiber. We don't need fiber, we need short chain fatty acids. If you don't have a good gut function, you cannot break down those plants to break down into short chain fatty acids. So there's three main ones. There's butyrate, there's propionate, and there's acetate. Acetate is mostly from vinegar. So you could have like a couple drops of apple cider vinegar if you can tolerate it. And then with butyric acid, as I mentioned, one of the ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate, is also a form that could give you that support. There are mammalian cells that can also produce in small doses butyrate. So if you eat animal fats, you'll be getting a little bit of that butyrate. And then lastly, your end colon, which is the sigmoid colon, it lives off of actually breakdown products of bacteria breaking down dead cells, mucus, and that is the butyrate that it produces, and that's the one that the colon prefers. So I don't see where in all of that mix that we need the plant's fiber to have the thriving microbiome. And we do so many GI maps in our practice, so it's a stool test, and I can tell you we see those three different short chain fatty acids all over the map. Some people in the carnivore space have it low. Some people have it super high as if they're eating fiber all day long. But I just think the data is too new to say we need fiber for sure because we see it all over the map with carnivores. So all to say, I think that kids can do it, but you want to think of also the mental health side. So you don't want to say, you can't have that. That's a bad food. That's going to cause you diabetes. So I may tell my children, hey, maybe you want to eat just like half of that cake because, look at mommy, like mommy got sick. And so I can't eat as much of that. If you want to eat that for the rest of your life, maybe you eat smaller doses.
Yeah. I mean, and also just make them really aware of how they feel after they eat, because I know with so many kids, if they are eating a relatively healthy diet and you do allow them to have the cookie or the cake and they get a stomach ache, they're like, okay, you point that out and be like, okay, remember how you feel. So next time, maybe you don't want to feel this way.
Right.
And you don't eat that. And then also, I just had to mention, going back to the whole fiber topic, I personally feel my best when I do not eat fiber or very little at all. And my gut thrives when I don't have a lot of fiber. And there's actually studies to show that inflammation in the gut has been reduced when little to no fiber is consumed. And I think that's just a really great point that you pointed out, Judy. Now, kind of just one last question just regarding the kids. How do you, or any tips to help children eat meat? Because maybe there's a mother listening and they're like, yes, I know my kid needs to eat meat, but they just don't. Like, do you have any tips for them?
Yeah, so a lot of times they'll say that I get reached out by mothers a lot because in my stories, I'll share my kids' lunch boxes, and they're almost always 100% carnivore. And so then we always get the question of, how do you have your kid eat meat when sometimes they don't like texture? The biggest thing I recommend is having your children snack less. So when I first had Caleb, I would have him eat all the time because I thought he would go hungry. So we had those little, those little oatmeal snacks where you learn the pincher grasp, and he was eating all day long, would have the applesauce, the organic applesauce, and then he would have little pouches, and then he would have his meals. But if you were to just reduce it, so my kids probably have 2.5 meals a day. And initially, so Caleb was more carb-based, if you could say it that way, but he didn't really want to eat the meat because it's either textury or it's too chewy or it's just too brown. There's not a lot of colors. And over time, as he got hungry, he enjoyed the meat. So I think one thing is to reduce the snacking. So after school, do they really need that bag of popcorn, or do they really need that applesauce or that little pouch of a drink? Or I know it's like healthy because it has the vitamins and minerals, but do they really need that? But because now you're putting them or slowly starting them on that sugar insulin roller coaster. But instead, if you allow their stomach to rest, I could test Aiden at any time, and he probably has a little bit of ketones in him, because when he's not eating, if he has a little extra fat on him, it'll eat that fat, or it'll use that fat for energy. And so then when he eats, though, he probably has, I think our kids on average eat about 10 ounces of meat in one sitting, and they're only 7 and 9 years old. So it's because, though, I don't allow them to really snack a lot. Now, if they're super hungry, of course, they could have beef jerky or string cheese or something. But that is the biggest thing I've seen. And then additionally, just knowing my kids' personalities. So I've seen that maybe Aiden likes more ground beef, whereas Caleb may like more steak. And so figuring out, try all the different options. We've tried, maybe you use a little bit of glaze, right? You use a little bit of like teriyaki sauce that's kind of healthy, or like a coconut aminos, and figure out what amount will my children, what seasonings can I use that don't hurt the child and will allow them to thrive, but then will allow them to eat meat. So we found so many different recipes where our children like it, but I know for sure if I gave them ribeyes, they're not big fans because it's kind of chewier and fattier. So then maybe we add a leaner meat, but then we'll add a little bit of butter on top. So it's figuring out what their needs are. But then the very first part is just not giving them the snack when they really, really want it. And liquids, their tummies are so small. So when we give them juices, our children do not drink any juices. It's only water and then maybe raw milk. But they do not drink juices because we have seen time and time again that if they have any bit of juice or any like milkshake right before their meal, they do not want to eat.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And I think too, even if your kids are really young, maybe shape the meat into different shapes, like fun little things, just to kind of keep things interesting. And then, so here's a question. Would you, like, let's just say you're at the dinner table and you're serving meat, and maybe you're serving a side of, I don't know if you serve grains in your home for your kids, or maybe a side of something, right? Some fruit. Would you serve them, or would the rule be that you have to eat the meat first before you can eat the extra stuff on the plate?
Yeah, so sometimes we have greens in our house. My husband is more paleo than anything. So we will have greens, but he has definitely become more meat-based since I do most of the cooking. But let's say we went to a restaurant and they ordered a meal where there's beef and then maybe there's like green beans, and then maybe there's bread. They don't usually eat the bread, but we will first and foremost, no matter what, eat the meat. So then once they're like 70% into the meat, then we'll say, yeah, if you want the green beans, go ahead. Or if there's mashed potatoes or something like that. So that's how we do it, because if you think about when your stomach is empty and you eat mostly sugar, it will spike your blood sugar and then your insulin will have to come and then save the day. And that will be a big tax on your liver. That's the reason we don't really give fruit juice, because it goes straight through your stomach and then to the liver, and your liver has to process all of that excess sugar. But if you eat mostly meat at first and fatty meat, then having a little bit of dessert at the end does not really cause a glucose spike.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Now, for the naysayers, are there any long-term side effects from doing carnivore?
I think the only one that I hear about is, oh, now that I used to be able to tolerate broccoli and now that I try to eat broccoli, I can't, I feel so much bloat. Well, I think it's just your microbiome's trying to shift. So if you give it about 2 weeks, you could absolutely tolerate the broccoli. So that would be my only thing I've noticed. I have not. And the other thing is now you know a healthier baseline that you've probably never experienced. And so then when you try to eat other foods, you can feel when you have lower energy or maybe you don't feel as well. And it's not that now I can't eat these foods. You just know how good it is to feel good. And so those are these nuances I've seen, but there is no long-term effects that I've seen. Our practice, we work with, again, the sickest of the sick, and we still highly recommend eating a strict diet until they can find healing. We do see that the environment also plays a role though beyond the diet. And I always tell all the naysayers, look, you could say I'm crazy. You could say that I've lost my mind, that I'm recommending an all meat diet. Just try it for 90 days. Just try it, go all in, and you could eat the dirty carnivore version. You could eat, especially if they don't have food sensitivities, just try it and see how you feel. Because Joe Rogan was exactly the same. I did a video on my YouTube years ago where he was like, carnivores are crazy, they're cuckoo. And then you see him just try it, just for the sake of trying it. And then he's 180 degrees difference in the belief in carnivore. But earlier on, years ago, he was so against it and thought we were crazy. And so I think unless you try it, unless all of these doctors are so against this diet, if you have not tried it for 90 days, I'm sorry, your opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, even if you tried it for a week or 2 weeks, I mean, you even said yourself when you first started, you're like, okay, I'm just going to try it for 2 weeks. Right. And so let's just say someone is already on a carnivore diet or they want to try it. But now they've figured out their issues and maybe they do want to try and introduce some new foods. Do you have any tips of going off carnivore diet and like ways to introduce foods slowly?
Yeah, so we created a food database of like what foods may be more toxic than others because it's so different. So generally speaking, fruit would be safe for most people, but if you were diabetic, fruit is probably not the first food you want to bring back in as an example. But given all that, assuming that you know which food to bring back in, I think generally as a rule of thumb, it's the foods that have the least amount of nutrients. So if you have the least amount of nutrients, then there's less anti-nutrients. So maybe, I know lettuce has a lot of downstream toxins that can stay on the lettuce, so it's probably not ideal, but lettuce doesn't have a lot of anti-nutrients. It's probably a safer food. It was probably best if you boil it. So all plant-based foods, if you can cook it, if you take off the outer membrane or if you peel the apple, those things would probably be better so that you're removing some of the pesticides naturally. And then if you cook it down, you're cooking off some of the anti-nutrients. Generally, what we recommend is go about 3 to 5 days per new food you add. So let's say you're eating your carnivore diet and now you decide, okay, at lunch, I'm going to add half a cup of, let's say we do sweet potatoes. I know sweet potatoes super high in oxalates, but we do maybe a quarter cup of sweet potatoes and then just see how you feel. This is where, again, the food and mood journal matters so much. How's your gut doing? How's your mental health? How's your fatigue? And if you feel like all of those are fine, then try it again at dinner. So now maybe at dinner, you do half a cup of baked potatoes that were steamed or roasted, and then see again, how do you do? How's your stool looking? And you keep doing that for about 3 days. And if you feel no real difference, of course, you're going to feel a little bit more bloat because it's a carbohydrate. But if you feel fine, then that food is probably a safe food. And then you could do it again now with some other new food. If a food makes you react, you would have to go back to baseline of just the carnivore meats and then start again where your symptoms are back to baseline and then start with a new food. And you would just keep doing that. Now, I know that could take a long time, but if you sort of know what your safe foods are, you can try to introduce them at 2 at a time as well. But that's probably the safest way.
For sure. And I mean, for me, I think I do a lot better with fruit than I do vegetables. right? So it just is all individual.
Right.
Now, I know we talked about iodine at the beginning of our interview, and I kind of want to bring it back here. And so can you just talk a little bit about it, the benefits of iodine, why we need it, maybe some signs and symptoms to look for if we're iodine deficient?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Iodine is used by every single cell in our body. So I know we think just iodine equals thyroid, but it's not. Now, we do need iodine and we do need an amino acid. I think it's tyrosine. I may be not 100% right with that, but it's a certain amino acid from a protein of animal meats, and then iodine that makes our thyroid hormone. So we absolutely need it for that. There was a period where we were so thyroid or iodine deficient that the government put iodine in our salts, but a lot of that iodine gets evaporated when the salt is made. So we actually need a lot more. We have found in our practice where there were people, so there was one young girl, she was 16 years old, diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and then she started taking iodine and all her symptoms improved, and she didn't change her diet. Like, she was eating gluten and all of the things that we don't recommend eating. But just adding iodine got her back to having energy and not feeling fatigue and hypothyroid and all the Hashimoto symptoms. We are deficient in iodine, not only because our foods are really deficient. Our sea kelp probably doesn't have as much iodine as we need, nor do we eat enough of it. As I mentioned, our salts really don't have enough iodine. Maybe it keeps the goiters away, but it's not really giving you the amount of iodine you need. So on the periodic table of elements, there's bromide, fluoride, iodine, and chloride, and all of them compete for one another. 3 of them are toxic. Bromide. So bromide is used in like fire retardant, so your rugs, so that it doesn't burn. All of those pajamas that children wear that are fire retardant, all furnitures, it's in literally everything, and it is a toxin to us. So every time we sit on our couch, we're breathing it in, and the only thing that could really dispel it from our bodies and in our tissues and on our fat cells is iodine. So we do 24-hour urine tests on people, and we find that even though they're taking iodine, they're still deficient because their bromide levels are high. And then same thing with fluoride. So I know a lot of people are starting to take not use fluoride for toothpaste, but it's in our waters. It's really in everything because of the water, it's in our water system essentially. And so again, if you have excess fluoride, and we see that too, then it's taking over, it's competing for your iodine, and you need it in your breast tissue. So I interviewed a lady on my channel, and she created a breast cancer foundation because for her, with all her research, she says that her breast cancer came from not having sufficient iodine. And she believes that everyone that's getting, or most women that are getting breast cancer that don't have it genetically because of the BRCA gene, it's highly likely that they don't have sufficient iodine, and that's why they're getting it. So for all of those reasons, I highly recommend. I give iodine to my children. I just put 1 drop in a gelatin capsule and have them swallow it. I don't give it to them often. Their thyroid markers look great. I take iodine occasionally as well, but we all need iodine. In terms of symptoms, it's the hypothyroid symptoms or the hyperthyroid. It's just fatigue, just low energy. Your hypothyroid might be actually caused by not having sufficient iodine.
Yeah, so important. Those are really good tips here. Now, lastly, I want to ask you if you could share a little bit about how important faith is or was in your healing journey, and how it can be so important because it's more than just the physical. I mean, it's super important to have a good mindset and faith base.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. I don't get to talk about it enough. So I was born and raised into a Christian family, but I think I just went away from it, and it was a lot more rituals and habitudes. But then I got really sick, and then I opened my practice, and sometimes I felt lost. I'm just being really candid of, I can't fix my client, or I can't fix my patient, or, the internet's not the nicest place sometimes. And then you hear mean things, and it's just, but that's not really what I meant by that, or they're judging my character. And a lot of that probably caused my eating disorder to occur before, where it's like I needed validation from maybe other people. And then I started listening. So my boys, every night we listened to a Christian podcast, and we listened to this one Bible study on Nehemiah, and he was trying to build a wall back, and everyone was against him. They were trying to kill him, but he's like, no, I got the decree that I need to build back the wall for God. And so he, against everyone, built it. And I just started crying because I realized, when I share about meat, it's not because people tell me you work for the farmer industry or the meat industry. And it's like, I wish they supported me. Like I've never gotten a penny, and I purposely don't get, like free things from different meat companies for that same reason. But I do it because I was so sick, and I truly believe I got a second chance at life. And now it's just, no matter how hard things get, no matter what happens, whether it's on the internet, whether my clients, whether I can't fix things, I trust that I'm not the one in control. So that I trust that, hey, God, I'm having a hard day, but I know that you have a plan, you have a purpose for why I'm here, why we're even doing this podcast. And I trust that whatever you guide me, I will follow. And once I let go of that, because I was so type A before, it has given me peace and freedom that I know what I stand for. And if God's behind me, like who can be against me? It gives me courage. And that even if, so like, for example, I went on a trip for 3 weeks to Korea, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to stumble with my words because I haven't been speaking English for a few weeks before meeting with you. And I just said, you know what? This isn't about me. God has me planned for this podcast. We're going to go through it and speak to it, and whatever wisdom I could share to help someone that's sick and desperate. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And if God has me in this role to share, and I will lean on him, if he says, Judy, this is it, no more talking about meat, I will follow. And yes, I could share all the science and all the reasons we need to believe and do. But beyond that, we have to have faith in something bigger than us. We will never have all the answers. We will never know. It's not that you didn't find the right protocol, the right diet, the right nutrient, the right this or that's not making you heal. Sometimes you have to have a belief in something beyond you, above you, and know that somehow everything will work for good. And you have to trust in that. And that allows a lot of my clients to be like, okay, I've been through 20 doctors. I can't trust anybody. I have to be my own advocate. But for some reason, I have peace. And a lot of times it's faith, and I can't shove faith down everyone, right? So at least I could share my story, because for me, it's changed my life. Like as much as the carnivore diet has changed my life, really leaning into God. And what I highly recommend is, I know that churches and organizations, it's all human made. Humans are sinful. So just read the Bible. For me, last year, I read the Bible back to back, and it's the living word. And it's really said that way because you will pick up the verses that you need at that time that make sense for only you. And so I highly recommend, don't be mad at the church or organizations or someone in the church, because I know there's a lot of that too. But just read the Bible and see like what comes to you, what fills you with joy and peace, and it's going to be okay. And focus on those things, because when people focus on, I'm never going to get better, no diet works for me, I'm always sick, what we find is those are the people that can't get better, because all they look for in the future is just their illness.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many good scriptures too in the Bible, like you had mentioned. I mean, and a lot of people do have a fear, and a lot of people don't know even what they're fearing. They just have a fear. And I know like Matthew 6:34, I believe it says, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. God has not given us a spirit of fear. That's in 2 Timothy. And just really knowing that the Lord is going to be with us. And I don't know where I would be without my faith in the Lord. Right. And like you said too, like we're human, we're sinners. And so there are going to be many churches that may not be doing the right practice. I don't know, but it's going back to the word and back to basics, which is basically what we're talking about today, is back to basics with me, and back to basics with faith and all that. So I just love that you can share that. Go ahead. Yeah,
there was one thing I wanted to say. So so we have a mind body program. And so I was looking at fear, and there was a study done where children are only born innately with 2 fears. One is the dark, and then one is loud noises. So everything else we learn is learned. So when we fear the X, or we fear something that's going to happen, like why do we fear that? It's probably something that's happened to us at a certain point. Our limbic system tells us don't ever do that again, or fear that, so that you're protecting yourself. But you have to challenge those things, because we are brought into this world with only 2 things we fear, and it's the dark and it's loud noises. And if you think about that, think about children when they fall. Do they say, I'm not going to ever try to walk again? Think about how many times they fall, and then they get back up and they're like, I'm going to try. And it takes them almost a year to start learning how to walk. And if we just put that tenacity and faith in, maybe today I'm sick and I have grace and I'm just going to lay down and I'm okay with that. But then maybe tomorrow I try again. And it's that hope that we have to have. And a lot of it is, where are you putting your energy, and what are you looking at? What are you consuming? And a lot of these things affect us from healing, because there's so much bad in this world right now, but there's hope. Instead, use that energy and like read the Bible, or read some more inspiring things, or read things that bring encouragement. Because when you look at the negative, which is so easy to do, it's so easy to complain, but it chokes us of the ability to have hope.
Yeah, wow. And fear really does hinder us from healing. And having the mind of a child, I mean, the Bible even says, have the mind of a child. And you're so right that children, if you look at them, they don't have a lot of fear. And it's a good point for us to look back and say, okay, why do I fear this? Because obviously I learned it some point in time.
Yes, no, exactly. And so yeah, if fear is and I think people just have to take a second and think, am I letting fear ruin my life? Or have I ever thought that I can get better? Or have I ever thought I could have a better life? And if you've never imagined that, I've asked some of the clients that want to lose weight, have you ever imagined yourself at a normal weight or thin? And they never have. And it's your brain will use the least amount of energy. And so that's why visualizations are powerful. There's even scriptures where they talk about visualizations. But if you visualize where you're going, then it's easier for your brain to go that way. But if you've never visualized that, if you've never imagined, I can be a normal weight one day, I can eat certain foods one day, I can heal one day, then you'll never get there, because you're not even allowing your brain to access that path.
Wow. Judy, I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours, but for time's sake, I think I'm going to close it here. But before we do, can you please let my listeners know, where can they find you on social media? Where can they get your book? All that good stuff.
Yes, thank you. So I'm at All Places Nutrition with Judy. We have a private practice where we work again with the chronically ill. And then I have 2 books. One's the Complete Beginner's Guide to Carnivore. And then I also have Carnivore Cure, which has the elimination diet.
Wonderful. And I'll be sure to put those links in today's show notes so you guys can easily access them as well. And again, thank you, Judy, for joining me. You are always welcome back.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Digest This. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review in your podcast app to let us know. If you're ever wondering how you can support me and this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family is the best way. This is a Resonant Media production produced by Drake Peterson and edited by Mike Fry. To email the show, message us at digestthispod@gmail.com. See you next time. The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical and mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or health team first.